and I lead the Data Science Law Lab here at the University of Victoria. I'm an associate professor in the law faculty, and I'm also a senior faculty member of the African Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence here at the University of Victoria. I am also a collaborator on this African Languages Lab project. So the theme of the panel discussion that we're going to be having today is bridging research and reality, the content pipeline. So I see it as the difference between going to the store and buying, say, let's use Checkers, going to Checkers, queuing up on the food line and buying maybe rice and maybe curry and coming home and heating it up. That's one thing. It's different from you actually making the food in your own house, getting the ingredients and getting it together. So the content pipeline is how we go from this, like from a concept to reality, where we now have AI models and AI systems that integrate and work primarily with African languages. Before we start, I need to shake up the room a little bit. So, an idea. AI systems should be allowed to use publicly available cultural and language data without explicit permission. Strongly agree? only the two of you. Strongly disagree? So the people that didn't raise their hands, where are you? No, you have to be somewhere. Agree. Strongly disagree. There are still people that did not. What is going on? No. You have to stand somewhere because this is where the discussion is going to go. Please stand somewhere. Okay. Right now, who benefits most from AI that is built on African language data? Is it the communities? Is it cultural institutions? Is it researchers? Is it tech companies? Hey, okay. Researchers? You're not sure. You're like, I don't know. Okay. Communities? You're the only one. I don't think it's communities at the moment, but I mean, anyway. Cultural institutions? No. Tech companies? Hey, this is bad. Okay, let's go into the discussion. So we will have Dr. Mpo. Is Dr. Mpo here? Yes. You'll be clapping. Let's be gingered, please. We have Jessica Mabaso. We have Puleng. Okay. And we have Dunisani. So the way we're going to go is we'll start with Dunisani and then Puleng, and then we'll go to Jessica, and then we'll hear from Dr. Mpo. What we will do is they will speak for a few minutes. So we'll start with Dunisani, who will talk about, just provide an overview of the status of indigenous languages and indigenous media in South Africa, and just take us through from content creation to lived language, and just start us off with the content pipeline. And then we'll come to Puleng. We're in Puleng's home. Yeah, we are in Puleng's home, and she will take us through curation and meaning. I'm hoping that as the conversations start, you would see where each of them, plug into the content pipeline. And then we will hear from Jessica. I was just yesterday at VITS at the conference that is being sponsored by Sadila, that is run by Dr. Mashinini. So we'll hear about infrastructure, about systems and access, and then we will come to Paul about building the infrastructure, about systems and access. When they finish their opening remarks, then we'll go into the discussion proper. And I'm expecting that we would have questions, comments, and we will really engage. So over to you, Dunisani.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for having me here. I mean, I'm not used to this site. I'm always used to that site, having a camera and my notebook. So, I mean, things are keep changing. Yeah. I think I'll start a bit with about the language. In 2012, government passed, I mean, the use of Foyela Act, which that act says that, I mean, each and every government department, parastatal, and they must have, I mean, a language unit. And that language unit must be able to produce, I mean, content, advertorials, I mean, in indigenous languages. So up until now, I mean, that act, I mean, has not been implemented. In fact, if that act it was a man, it would be even a good interest now. And then when we move on, I mean, the progress in traditional reading literacy studies, they reported that, I mean, more than 80% of grade 4, I mean, they cannot read for understanding. And when you look at all these things that I'm mentioning here, it's not
my office, as you can see, because since it's really been helping me think about this idea of language. This is a work by George Dabashane, created in 1977, speaking about 1976. Now, the idea of 1976, of course, as you know, is that we were protesting against the issue of language, particularly the Afrikaans language. Fast forward, we move to Youth Must Fall, where students are protesting not only about the sculptures that exist, that speak to a very colonial way of thinking, but also here, particularly in the University of Pretoria, there was something called hashtag Afrikaans Must Fall. Now, this article is very important because it really speaks to this, again, idea of language within Pretoria. Fast forward again, now we are looking at the Bella Bill, where there is clause 4 and 5, specifically speaking to this idea, again, of language and instruction within schools. So, here we are now speaking about language within the digital space. Again, another fast forward. So, in reflecting about these since 18 months ago, I think it's important to think about how the artistic process also assists in this thinking of the curatorial, but also these objects that we have here at the Jesuit Arts Center.
Thank you so much. I wanted to, so that we are hearing very interesting things, right? Yes? Let's be, yeah, let's be gingered. Should I say you should stand up? This is a university. I can say stand up and but I wanted us to just keep in mind what we're hearing so that it can help us spark the discussion that we will have after all the panelists are done talking. So from Dunisani, we already heard about this thing about setting up language units and the fact that that didn't happen, and the fact that if it was money, it would have yielded a lot of interest by now. We heard that, right? And I want us to start thinking about, and also the panelists as well, to start thinking about where we miss it in terms of data scarcity for, the getting our languages on the digital space, getting our languages into AI systems, where we even miss it from from even the way that we don't implement policies that help us start getting the data from the outset, right? So that's, the media, indigenous media experience speaking. But we then also then heard from Puleng what I am personally scared about, because if you're the one giving meaning, right? If you're the one translating, there's a lot of power that you hold in deciding what makes it out there. And I think when you look at, let's say, material heritage, for example, when you look at it, it's a two-way conversation happening. The person who made that particular material heritage has something they want to say, and something that they are saying through what they've presented to the world. But it also sparks a conversation, because when you experience that material cultural heritage, you might not experience it the same way that the person who made it thought about it. And it's your prerogative as a human being to, experience it in any way that you experience it, right? So those two conversations are happening, and we don't know what then makes it into the AI system. Is it what the author wanted to say, or is it what the curator wants you to see? So let's hold that in mind. I will ask you about it. Yeah?
While I wait for my slides to come up. Good morning, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I see quite a few familiar faces today. My name is Jessica Mabaso. I am from Sadela. I do not come alone. I'm not my colleague Larissa Crystal and Natala Chalale. And we are part of the Escalator program at Sadela, where we are responsible for capacity building and development, sharing all the resources that our mother infrastructure, cellular, creates or enables for creation. Within that program, I'm the program coordinator, and today I want to talk a bit about what it really takes to build. Sorry. Oh, there we go. I was trying to drag my words. But I want to talk about what it really takes to build an infrastructure, a language infrastructure. And I'm not just talking technically, because of course, being part of Escalator, we also look at the people that whose languages we are trying to support. So I will carry on.
From the escalator project, from what Sadila does. One of the things I want to highlight already is the work in the annotation space, right? And you see how that connects with what Buleng said about curation. There's a lot of work that goes into the annotation stage of the pipeline, right? There's a lot of work that goes into translation. Am I even a lawyer if I don't quote one case or the other? And so I'm going to quote a case. Here in South Africa, for the longest time, since 2015, so 11 years now, there's been the process of amending the Copyright Act here in South Africa. And one of the burning issues with the amendment process is that people with visual disabilities have gone to court to say that the amendment process is taking time. And already there are aspects of the copyright statute in South Africa that is unconstitutional. And the reason why they say it's unconstitutional is because it treats people with visual disability differently from people that don't have visual disabilities. And the reason is because there's all this claim around, people who own copyright in text, in any material that is copyright protected, and they don't allow other people to make those materials in an accessible format where people with visual disabilities can then access the work. So they went to court. It went all the way to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court agreed with the Blind Essay. That's the group that took the matter to court. One of the things that I want to then highlight from what the Constitutional Court said is that if you're making an existing work into an accessible format copy, sometimes all you do is copy and paste, so you leave the thing the way it is, right? But most of the time, you go beyond the reproduction into adaptation. And that's what happens with annotation. Because in annotation, you are not just taking the thing the way it is and putting it in another format that someone can access. You are interacting with the material. You are giving meaning into the material. You are trying to convey something into this new material. So if I'm translating, you heard what happened to, you saw what happened to Buleng when she brought her Zulu into the Sepedi, and that's what happens with annotation. That's the process. So we have to then start thinking about the connection between all that we've been hearing so far, where at the annotation stage there's more than copy and paste going on. How do we then recognize all that work, and how do we take care in the way that we translate, in the way that we annotate, in the way that we label, so that it doesn't cause issues in the content pipeline? We're following, right? We're on this ship together, yes? Okay.
Of a cross-cutting institutional coordination. There are semblance of that in what we're doing, but I think as a group here, we can think about coordinating these activities as a way where we are going to do a cross-cutting coordination. First thing, I'm thinking of linguistic epicenter approach. We might think about having universities according to the languages that we've got, and ask them to focus on those languages and develop a data set within different kind of environment or different kind of faculties and the like. And then we're basically going to share that at a higher level. So University of Pretoria will be focusing on a particular language that is assigned maybe based on their language policy, and another university does the same. So when we do the data set collection and harvesting, we're going to be working, be fed at a national and a high level from this university. That is basically what I'm referring to as the epicenter approach. The other one is language audit oriented. Each and every university is allocated languages to develop. So in our case, unfortunately, as UNISA, we're doing all the languages. It's quite a big cut to chew, but we're trying our own. Then the other universities have been allocated languages that are manageable. I think here it's Sotho Salaboa and English Afrikaans and it's in the red. If I'm right, I might be right. If I'm wrong, you'll correct me. So if those are the ones, then it will be basically when we develop harvesting of data, we will be this university to focus on those languages and develop them as they go along. And when we put everything together as a united ecosystem kind of connectivity ourselves in the national level, we will be able to have enough information flowing from different angles. So those are basically the proposition that I'm making for today's discussion. I think as we discuss further, we'll have a little bit of more explanation to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. Because how long do we have? Okay.
Yeah.
Are there questions? Are there comments? Are there thoughts? Before, let me not keep talking. I should keep talking. Okay. I think one of the things that I heard from what Dr. Paul said is I like the acknowledgement about it being an ambitious task to focus on all the languages. But I also acknowledge the fact that if we buy into the idea of having different universities focus on a specific language, I think it's going to help with it's going to result in us having standardization as a natural consequence, because if we are if we have a cross-cutting collaboration, right, and we agree on parameters for working on those languages, what would then happen is that we then have systems that speak to what Jessica said about the fact that the technologies are not so aligned or so much connected to the way that our languages are, in terms of the tones, in terms of um, the way we speak and all that. And so if we start to build on cross-cutting collaboration, those are some of the things that would help us arrive at a unified point where we, as a natural consequence, create or get technologies that work the way that our languages work, instead of being Eurocentric as they currently are in most places. So now it's time for us to delve deeper into discussions. Jessica, you talked about attribution, right? And you said that working with communities requires that we acknowledge the contribution of those communities. And you also then said, how do we acknowledge that contribution in a way that is respectful of the contributions that the communities have made, but also in a way that, what is a meaningful way of going beyond just saying that we worked with these communities, they are our data sources? What do you think is a meaningful way of taking that, let me call it a partnership? What do you think is a meaningful way to take that partnership forward? When you speak, after you're done speaking, I'll come to you, Dunisani, to help us plug it into the indigenous media pipeline. So let's start with Jessica.
Okay. To start. Okay, yes. I really, really do believe that the communities should be benefiting as much as we benefit from what we gain from them. So I think the best way to start would be just planting back. The same way you have appreciated what you receive from there, make sure that you enable them to be able to continue. Because your research, your work is going to grow so much further, even internationally. Give them some sort of way of also enabling themselves to grow from where they are, because that is what you used to assist yourself.
Okay. Dunisani. So speak. So from let's use Tabela as an example. If you working in the indigenous media space, how does the, let me call it a content loop? How does the content loop work from the work that you produce? For example, let's use Intervelas, from the work that you produce there into the content pipeline. How do you see the flow happen?
No, very much. Or maybe before I come to that one, I just want to thank Prof. in his introduction. He mentioned that, there's a low data in indigenous languages.
Yes.
And it's the same as, as Isabel. There's a Voyante, there's something called Voyante that I do. And that Voyante thing is not in all languages. I know some of the languages, like Shivenda, they don't have it at all. Just recently now in Shitsonga, we are trying to develop to develop one. In fact, we've launched one last year, but there's still some discussion that we still have to finalize. And maybe indirectly, yes, touch it. In fact, I'm going to cut that link and send to your colleagues. If you see what your colleagues will send you already answered your question. So the word that I normally prefer to speak on behalf of all the languages, the community newspapers across the country. 2 weeks back, I was in the city of Cape Town. They were celebrating, or they want to do something about IMBO. IMBO, it's a publication that was started in 1834. So they were thinking to eradicate it. So when I look at it, and when I look at all the challenges that we are facing now, institutionally, like the Prof saying and the federal saying, it's need, a media house.
Yes.
Back then, when I look at, there was involved, there were quizzes, there were Soulfly and Kikuranta was one. There's quite a number of publications in indigenous language, in community media.
Yeah.
So when it comes to now, the number is very shrinking. In Uganda now, we used to have one publication. At the moment, we don't have any publication. So the work that we are doing, it is, in fact, at the beginning I thought it's not crucial, but it is very important. Because another thing that will make sure that it's not just like any publication. We follow the what we call the orthograph of pencil, because it doesn't help for me or for anyone across the country to have this particular publication, and it's not following the press code, it's not following, because at the end of the day, as Sabila are developing this thing, and then to take this thing and put in the system, and then you take this thing and put in the system, and that thing is wrong, and then later, it's going to come back and haunt us. By that time, I won't be there. It's only you who's going to deal with that particular problem that I left with it. And again, you've mentioned something, about the funding. I think you put it very well, because there's this thing, this is little bit paid, there's this thing, little bit, there's this thing, little bit. Because at the moment, the community needs, they're really struggling. We know, city press, they've closed down, and how about someone that's holding now, or CPC, or fish, so this type of discussion, like what they've mentioned, we need to work together. In fact, the competition commission, last year when they released the final report about the Google thing, they've touched a lot about the AI, in the vernacular language. I think maybe the Prof can touch it later. And then they recommended that one of the recommendations is that institution of highlighting the big tech company and the community media, especially those that are publishing in just language, should come together and work together, so that we can come we can achieve what we want.
Okay. So this is a problem now that we've identified. We know that partnerships are very key to taking us from 0 to 100, right? What kind of partnerships can we start thinking about forming in a meaningful way? I'm going to come to you, Puleng, now, about from the perspective of curation, and how what you are expecting in terms of so let's use indigenous media houses as an example. And I take on board what Dunisani said about speaking to all of them as a collective. So say you have these indigenous media houses, and there's all this content in indigenous languages coming out. What would make sense from a curation perspective in terms of getting them into some sort of, let's say, database or collection that would then make sense to take forward into, say, an AI system or even the pipeline itself?
Thank you for that question and even that example of the case study. So I think it's important, and I think Prof mentioned this, is to rather specialize. So if I use the example of the two exhibitions we spoke about today, how Measures exhibition is clearly stated, there is no need for us to think about other languages. I would rather we deepen the knowledge, we deepen the language in terms of its interpretation. Whereas downstairs, the Breakers collection really speaks to the idea of artists who created these works from KZN, artists that created these works from various provinces. So in thinking about those provinces, I think it's also important for us to think about the language that exists within those provinces. I really like what you said, Sisi, about thinking about this collaboration with the community. And I think it's very, very important, even when thinking about these languages, we speak about partnerships. When we think about partnerships, it's always the first thing that comes in mind is the financial, the funding aspect. But as the example I made with the Brenters collection, when you have funders that don't that assist in the process of collection, of creating the work, there are little moments that that may not be emphasized that should be. For example, in this case, very relevant to this conversation, the idea of language. So that's where I believe that the partnership with the community comes in. How do we begin to speak to Abomama, Abogogo within the community to translate these objects? And furthermore, how can that be translated in the future ways in which we're thinking about these universities that can think about how AI can, interpret these moments. Yeah.
Okay. So, does anyone in the room have, from what you've heard so far, is there anyone amongst us sitting in front of you that you see a strong connection or a strong way to have a meaningful partnership in the work that you do and in the work that you've heard that they do? Shoot your shot. Anyone? Don't go and meet them secretly. Better talk now. Okay,